listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League daily episode for February 9th, 2018. Today I'm joined by LemonKiwi. It's also her birthday today, so be nice. We're going to go ahead and discuss the London Spitfire versus Houston Outlaws game yesterday and what it means for the league. But first, let's go to the scoreboard, brought to you by patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. Yesterday featured two matches that have tangible consequences on the Stage 1 playoffs. The first is the Boston Uprising taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. Both of these teams came into the match at 5-3, and depending on how the other matches work out, could be seeing themselves in the Stage 1 playoffs. It all starts on Eichenwald, where the Fusion would be unable to get anything going on offense, only capturing 49% of Point A. On offense, Boston would capture with more than 3 minutes to spare. We then went to Horizon Lunar Colony. Both teams would finish the map, but Boston would have a 4-minute and 46-second advantage in the time bank for round 2. Even with the time disadvantage, the Fusion were able to finish 2 ticks on Point B, but that wasn't enough. Boston would go up 2-0 at halftime. Philadelphia aren't able to do much after the half as they lose Ilios in a quick 2-0 sweep. Boston has the match locked down at 3-0. Boston wasn't done yet, though. On Junkertown, both teams would finish the map in overtime, but Boston put up a stellar defense and a strong offense to take the map and complete the sweep 4-0. For the second match of the night, we saw the NYXL take on the Florida Mayhem. Things went about as expected as NYXL would win the series 3-0. However, Florida did show some resilience on Horizon Lunar Colony, forcing the draw. For the final match of the night, it's the Houston Outlaws, who have been near perfect as of late, minus a close 3-2 loss against the Dynasty, going up against the London Spitfire, who have stumbled a bit, but recently swept Seoul 4-0. Honestly, this is a match that you have to go back and watch for yourself, but the highlights are Houston looked stellar, they were prepared, and they caught London on their heels. Houston would win Eichenwald and Temple of Anubis with strong defensive holds before they would 2-0 the Spitfire on Oasis. London would thwart the sweep by taking Dorado, but ultimately fall to Houston 3-1. I sat down with LemonKiwi to discuss the Spitfire Outlaws match more in depth. So, Lemon, what I want to do is I want to skip Boston versus Philadelphia. I want to skip the Mayhem versus NYXO, and I want to talk about the Spitfire versus the Outlaws, because even though Boston and Philadelphia was an important match, this Spitfire versus Outlaws match means a lot, not just for the immediate week of the stage playoffs, but also just kind of for the overall strength of the top half of the league right now. So my question is, we've known that Houston has been on a tear so far, but what were the mismatches? Where was Houston able to kind of exploit London and pull out the win so decisively?
Well, I think just to start that this was a pleasant surprise that Houston took the win at the very end. You would think that Spitfire were the favorites coming into the season, but to get into this match in particular, I think that Houston played this match amazingly. They were able to separate particularly London's backline from the rest of their team, and even highlighted a stat in the middle of that match that Closer died 4 times more than Banny did on Eichenwald, for example. And now going into these DPS matchups, for example, like Linkzer, had the flu for a little bit, so you weren't sure how he's sort of warming back up to the team, if he's even been practicing, but he really, really popped off on McCree, especially on Eichenwald. And then you had Birdring, who's also going against him on McCree, but he's a very, very good McCree, but how much Outlaws were pushing them in and just steamrolling them did not allow their London star DPS players to perform as well as they usually do. And especially when Jake riptires like every 30 seconds, it really throws a wrench in their gears. And then you had the matchup of Prophet versus Jake, and you saw Prophet trying to flex around a Genji and a Junkrat to try and counter Jake. But again, Prophet just was not able to target Houston's supports. with the Riptire as effectively as Jake can towards London supports. And just the supports for London were just going down like flies, and it really just limits all the resources that the DPS needed to carry the team. And then you had London's tank line really, really struggling. When Fury got subbed in, I thought he had a very poor performance on Anubis, kind of wasting a self-destruct on the first team fight of Point B on attack, and then Fury getting demeched on the way to Point B at the start of the team fight, so losing the team fight for the team before it even begins. They got Jester, who a couple of times was overdiving out of position and sort of miscoordinating with the off tank, and Jester was consistently getting picked first in the fight, which was crumbling and dismantling for the team fight for London.
So was London winning the fight anywhere, in your opinion, on this one? Because it sounds like the supports weren't winning, the DPS weren't winning, and the tanks weren't winning.
Yeah, it's Houston were just targeting those supports. So you know Bird Ring and Prophet are extremely talented on those DPS roles. London are a top team, but they were not playing like the top team against Houston when they lacked their supports. And I think that's just the targeting skills and how Houston were able to divide their team so effectively in that match that London crumbled.
So London is in a little bit of a pickle now. So they've lost to Boston and Houston, which, if we're being honest, probably aren't the two teams we expected them to lose to begin the season. We probably thought maybe Seoul, NYXL, maybe one of those top other teams, maybe on like a really good day. But they've lost to Boston. They lost to Houston. Where are they getting beat? Where are they falling apart?
I think their front line has really been struggling. Again, I've highlighted Jester being out of position a lot of times, getting picked again and again in the start of these fights, forcing out the resurrect from closer. And then where Houston or Boston then steamroll after bringing that momentum towards them. And in terms of the DPS, I feel like London have been playing a little bit out of their comfort zone. Prophet isn't really known for his Junkrat, and you saw him playing that a lot to try and counter Jake. You saw Rascal, who has such a large hero pool, pull out a Genji against someone that's a seasoned Genji like Dreamcasper. And a lot of the DPS from London were getting outclassed from the DPS from Houston and Boston. And then even in Game 5 versus Boston, that was actually a very close match, and I think it probably could have went either way. But then you saw Bird Ring play McCree and Prophet play a Tracer, when usually it's the other way around. Prophet usually plays the Tracer and Bird Ring will play, or the Bird Ring usually plays Tracer and Prophet plays a little bit more McCree or something else. So they're switching, they're flexing around different DPS roles that they're maybe not as seasoned on, where they're going against DPS players on other teams that they play with their comforts.
Do you think that might change with Stage 2 and getting maybe a little bit different meta now that those Mercy nerfs would be live? We've got now some Sombra changes, which aren't as big of a deal, but some of the other changes to the heroes to maybe allow them to play their comfort heroes a little bit more often.
So with the upcoming Mercy nerf, it's still a question of whether Mercy's still going to be meta now or not. I know a lot of teams are expecting triple tank and quad tank to come in with Mora, but I think, Stage 2 with these new changes coming in with Sombra, with Junkrat, well, it's not as big of a change, but mainly Mercy, it's going to be a whole new meta, and teams are going to be adapting to a whole new playstyle. So I don't know what to expect. I still think that they're going to have to improve on the positioning of their supports, whichever one they end up playing.
So I think one of the more exciting, again, maybe it's just like the underdog fan in me. I've slowly got this spot in my heart for the Boston Uprising, but the Houston Outlaws have a big game coming up against Boston. And it's very likely that depending on if the Uprising can take it decisively, I believe mathematically it works out to where one is in the stage playoffs and one is not. I'm going to double check that while you're answering. But in that matchup between the Boston Uprising and Houston Outlaws, who do you think has the upper hand?
I think it's going to be a close match, and just Boston Uprising haven't been a topic throughout this whole league of being a top contending team, or at least some talks of it, but they haven't been, let's say, in the top 5 list of anyone's predictions, I think. But when it comes down to the Houston and Boston, I think it's going to be a close match, and we'd have to probably go map by map and how each team's compositions are sort of going to sort themselves out. I think Eichenwald surely favors Boston because Boston have Dream, Casper, running that far, who's unstoppable on that, and Strike, who's probably one of the best tracers in the league right now. Boston took Eichenwald easily against NYXL, which is a top team in this league. So I think this should be an easy map to win against Houston, if of course they're performing at their full potential. You see Jake kind of occasionally bring the fire out, but if maybe Houston can win that ground war, maybe it can go in their favor. But Boston, I think Eichenwald's one of their stronger maps. I think on Anubis, I think this is going to be Jake's Junkrat Paradise. I think this is going to be a map he's really going to be popping off on. And another fun matchup we might expect is Linkser versus Dream Casper on the Widowmaker duel-off, where, of course, I could be turning the tides for whichever team that one of the Widows outperforms on. But that'll be exciting. I think they're pretty evenly matched. But Jake's Junkrat, I think, has been very dangerous on Anubis, and I think Houston wins those. Should be able to win Anubis unless Boston bring out a better Junkrat of their own. Onto Ilios, or in control maps in general, Boston have a 10-5 record, and Houston have a 5-9 record. So control maps are not Houston's best map types or game modes. But you'd have to go again into the singular points. Like, for example, on Ruins, you expect, again, this Widow duel between Linkser and Dream Casper, or maybe even Jake to pick up the Tracer on here. So a Jake versus Striker matchup, I think it's obviously going to go in favor of Striker. Jake's not super known for his Tracer, but he's able to maybe put up a good fight there. If in a point like Lighthouse or Well, if Houston have maybe Mendo or Clockwork rock the Farah, then they might run a Pharmacy against Dream Casper. But again, I think Dream Casper is a very superior Farah, and that Houston are going to have a hard time doing the Pharmacy battle against Dream Casper. But again, Houston can maybe try and win that ground war and make Dream Casper kind of useless to the team if they win the ground war. So I still think that's, again, going to be in Boston's favor. So they should be able to take the control map. And then here going into Dorado, Escort is one of Boston's weaker game modes. So this would be, again, another chance for Houston to pop off on. They have Linkser on the Widow, Jake on the Junkrat. It's a very, very solid, almost impenetrable defense for Houston. So I think Boston will have a hard time on this. But usually Boston like to run full dive on Dorado. So if they're able to coordinate that properly, maybe shut down Jake on the Junkrat, they'll have a chance to make a pretty solid attack and snowball this one. But I guess my final prediction of Boston versus Houston would be a 3-1 to Boston, and Houston only taking Anubis.
Interesting. I like it. I'm with you. I'm on Team Boston. I want to see Boston in the playoffs. I know I guess we're supposed to be unbiased in these things, but screw that.
Kind of.
Yeah, let's just let Boston, for me personally, just off my feelings, you brought facts to your argument, which is probably a lot better suited. Well, let's talk.
Or your favorite color? Do you like blue versus green?
I just can't get past the uterus shape in the for the Houston Outlaws. That's
I was a secret Fuel fan, so I guess I was automatically supposed to hate the Outlaws, but now I can't. It's hard to be a Fuel fan these days. So
yeah, it's like being a Minnesota sports fan for any sport. You just kind of wear it under your normal clothes. So yeah,
don't tell anybody.
Right. So let's talk. I want to talk about Houston a little bit because Houston has had a very interesting story. I think Boston is very similar to this, except expectations were totally flipped. No one had really any expectations for Boston. Boston people expect to be down. Basically, I probably would say, I think they messed up Boston in Fuel. That's kind of where it is right now, where you expect Boston to be sitting down where the Fuel are right now, and the Fuel to be sitting up where Boston is right now. And there wasn't a lot of expectation there, but for the Houston Outlaws, there was a lot of expectation for them to do well. And they had a really difficult preseason. They had a really difficult first week. And then since then, they've really been on a tear. So what in your mind has Houston changed besides the all-father, high-coached, high-wrong from then until now to be so dominant?
So I think Houston were thought to be middle, maybe even bottom of the pack when it came to around preseason time, just based on their roster, maybe some previous knowledge. But they started to prove themselves more as throughout the season came up, and to mainly talk about what changes they've done from the beginning towards what they are now, mainly highlighting Jake and sort of what role he's become to the team. Of course, DPS and a hard carry for the team as well, but he was playing a lot of soldier and different heroes at the start of the preseason and the start of the season, and now he just solely plays Junkrat, and maybe you see some Tracer here and there, but Junkrat has been his main comfort pick, where he's able to pop off on and make it work on every single map. So while he's been experimenting with different roles, everybody else, the composition has been pretty much the same. You see Muma running this Orisa and Winston, and you see Coolman just never gets off of Diva. Raucus frags out at Zenyatta, the supports holding on to Mercy. So it's been really Jake finding his diversity and flexing onto different DPS roles. But overall, I think it's Houston's cohesion that's been improving, and they're getting used to maybe... of course, we don't know what their communication and their comms are like. Maybe different shot callers are being initiated. But their cohesion, their teamfight cohesion has been improving consistently over the season. And you remember in preseason when it was Houston versus Fuel and how close that match was. If I would tell you today that Fuel went over Houston, you wouldn't believe me. And can you imagine how much improved that Houston got from preseason losing to Fuel to being top 3 to Fuel beating Houston and being bottom 3? So you can tell how much time Houston have been putting into practice and playing around their DPS.
Last question I have for you, then I'll let you go. London. Do you think London is in any real trouble for now going through the rest of this season with their recent performances against Boston and Houston?
Well, they did lose 2 of those matches, but those are solid teams to lose to. It's not like you're losing to Shanghai or the Fuel or anything like that. But I don't think they're in any trouble whatsoever. Yes, they lost to Houston and Boston, but they beat other juggernauts such as Seoul and Valiant. So they're still in a good running. And after that, those 2 losses, their only other losses to Gladiators in the first week of the season. So Spitfire is still looking strong. I think this is maybe just an off week and they'll have to bounce back at it, and especially when they're facing NYXL next.
Awesome. Well, Lemon, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It was great to hear your thoughts on yesterday's matches, and hopefully I see you soon. Maybe we'll do some more open division casting or something.
Totally. Have me back anytime.
My thanks to LemonKiwi for stopping by on the show today. Make sure to follow her on Twitter at LemonKiwi with an _ at the end. Tomorrow's guest, I'm actually going to be joined by the San Francisco Shock coach, Dylan O'Donnell, also known as LegitRc. We talked a little bit about the Shock's philosophy for the upcoming Overwatch League and Stage 2, what that might bring, and also how they're integrating Super and Sinatraa into their scrims and even contenders. So don't miss that one. Also, coming up tomorrow for Overwatch League, we've got the Los Angeles Gladiators going up against the Dallas Fuel at 4 p.m. Pacific time, Seoul Dynasty going up against the San Francisco Shock at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and the Los Angeles Valiant going up against the Shanghai Dragons at 8 p.m. Pacific time. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, everywhere else, your iTunes and everything. Give it a like, tell your friends. We really appreciate it. And of course, you can watch or listen to the show on the front page of winstonslab.com. You can also find links to the show and everything else at overwatchleaguedaily.com. And if you have any questions or comments you want discussed on the show, email me at overwatchleaguedaily.com or overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com. Sorry. My thanks again to LemonKiwi for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow with LegitRc for another episode of Overwatch League Daily.